if I told you? The money in your bank account didn't exist until someone went into debt for it. Not printed, not mined, created. But before we go deeper, let's look at one number you cannot ignore. By the end of 2025, global government debt alone stood at more than $111 trillion. And that's just public debt, not companies, not households. The United States national debt is over $38 trillion, the highest in the world, and climbing. China follows with about $18.7 trillion, and Japan with nearly $10 trillion in government obligations. And when we measure debt relative to economic size, Japan's debt is over 230% of its GDP, meaning it owes more than twice what its entire economy produces in a year. The US hovers around 120%, the UK around 100%. Many other major economies are beyond 80 to 100%. Think about that for a second. Most countries owe more than they produce, and they're still borrowing. Which brings us back to that original question. If money is created through debt, and all this debt requires paying interest, where does the money for the interest actually come from? Because if banks create the principal but not the interest, the system has a structural flaw so profound it explains everything happening in the economy right now. In 2014, the Bank of England released an official report, Money Creation in the Modern Economy. They admitted something banks never explicitly discuss. Commercial banks create money by making new loans. When a bank approves a mortgage, it credits the borrower's account with a bank deposit. At that moment, new money is created. Think about what this means. When you borrow $300,000 for a house, the bank doesn't check their vault. They simply create an entry on their computer. $300,000 appears in your account. New money is created on their balance sheet. Asset, your $300,000 mortgage, liability, your $300,000 deposit. The balance sheet balances. Everything looks normal, but they just created $300,000 out of thin air. Now here's the trap. The bank creates the principal, $300,000, but they require you to pay interest, say 5% over 30 years. That means you'll pay back $560,000 total, $260,000 in interest. But the bank never created the $260,000. So where does it come from? This is a central question, and the answer exposes the system's fatal flaw. Here's what's stunning about the current situation. Global debt equals $348 trillion total, up from $318 trillion in just 1 year. That $30 trillion added in a single year. Broken down, government debt $106.7 trillion, corporate debt $100.6 trillion, household debt $64.6 trillion, financial sector debt $76.1 trillion. The problem, global GDP growth equals 2.5 to 3% per year. Debt growth equals 10 times faster. If your debt grows 10 times faster than your income, you have a structural problem. Let's see how this plays out in specific countries. Japan, 223% debt to GDP, owes more than twice what it produces annually. US, $37.4 trillion debt, plus $970 billion in annual interest payments. By 2030 to 2035, US interest payments could hit $1.5 to $2 trillion per year. At that point, 30 to 40% of all federal tax revenue goes just to paying interest. That leaves nothing for defense, healthcare, education, or anything else. China, 138% corporate debt to GDP, real estate collapse waiting to cascade. The system is stretched thin everywhere. This is the central trap that explains everything about the economy. Banks create principal, but not interest. So where does interest come from? Answer 1. New debt creates money for old interest. New loans create new money. This new money allows old interest to be paid. But this creates a death spiral. You need continuous debt creation just to service old debt. When lending slows, like in 2008, there's suddenly not enough money to pay interest. People default, the system collapses. The Fed had to inject trillions in new money to prevent complete shutdown. This is why the system is so fragile. It depends on perpetual debt expansion. Answer 2, economic growth. When the economy grows, people earn more. They can pay interest from higher incomes. But here's the problem. 1960s. Global growth averaged 5%. 1980s, 3.5%, 2000s. 3%, 2020s. 2 to 2.5%. Growth is slowing while debt accelerates. The system is increasingly dependent on borrowing, not on actually being more productive. Answer 3. Wealth transfer from savers to borrowers. Banks pay savers 0.5 to 2% interest. Banks lend that money at 5 to 7%. The spread comes from savers' purchasing power. In inflationary environments, savers lose value, borrowers benefit. The top 1% has gotten richer during low-rate periods because they have access to cheap debt. Meanwhile, regular savers watch their savings erode. The brutal reality. Global debt equals $348 trillion. Annual interest due equals $10 to $14 trillion. Global GDP equals $105 trillion. That means 10% of all economic output is just transferring from debtors to creditors. This money doesn't create jobs or innovation. It just transfers wealth upward. And here's what's terrifying. This 10% transfer is mandatory. It's baked into every economic calculation. Remove it, and suddenly there's no money for growth, investment, or wages. Keep it, and the system slowly strangles under the weight of debt service. Here's what's happening right now that most people don't see. The US interest payment crisis. In 2025, the US paid $970 billion just in interest. That's up from $600 billion in 2023. Current projections, $1.5 to $2 trillion per year by 2030 to 2035. This is mandatory spending. Congress can't cut it. The government legally must pay. Imagine federal revenue is $4 trillion. If $2 trillion goes to interest, only $2 trillion is left for defense, $820 billion, Social Security, $1.3 trillion, Medicare, veterans, education, infrastructure, everything else. Do you see the problem? $2 trillion in revenue cannot cover all those programs. So what happens? Either 1. The government cuts spending, Social Security, education, infrastructure. 2. The government raises taxes, which slows the economy. 3. The government defaults, currency crashes, inflation explodes. 4. The Fed prints money, hyperinflation follows. None of these scenarios are good. The corporate refinancing nightmare companies issued massive debt at 1 to 2% interest. 2009 to 2021. Now that debt matures, they must refinance at 5 to 7%. For highly leveraged companies, interest expenses are growing faster than earnings. This means less money for hiring, R&D, and growth. Slower company growth equals slower economy-wide growth equals less ability to service debt. This creates a death spiral. The system hasn't collapsed yet because it has pressure valves, but all of them are failing at the same time. Valve 1, the debt end game. How it breaks. When a debt system this massive becomes unsustainable, history offers 3 exits. First, controlled restructuring. Governments and creditors negotiate to delete trillions in debt. It's a massive haircut for investors, but it keeps the system on life support. Second, chaotic default. This is the 2008 nightmare. Panic spreads, bond yields spike, and the global plumbing freezes. Without a massive bailout, the ATMs stop working. Third, currency debasement. This is the most likely path. Governments print infinite money to pay the debt, effectively nuking your savings. Your $100,000 isn't gone, it just loses its power. The survival blueprint. In this environment, your strategy must shift. Your income, relying on one employer, is the biggest risk you can take. When credit tightens, businesses cut costs. You need diverse income streams and skills that exist outside a corporate payroll. Your debt, variable rate debt, is a ticking time bomb. High rates are the new normal. Lock in fixed rates now, or pay down high interest liabilities aggressively. Your assets, cash is a melting ice cube. You need productive assets, real estate, recession-proof businesses, or specialized knowledge. In a reset, resilience beats optimization. The timeline and trust. Why now? Because money is fundamentally trust. We've moved from gold to paper to digital blips, but as debt levels hit the stratosphere, that trust is bleeding out. From 2025 to 2027, interest payments will start consuming national budgets, forcing a choice between Social Security or bondholders. By 2030, we hit the reckoning. Whether through CBDCs or a new gold standard, the era of unlimited fiat is ending. The system isn't just changing, it's being replaced. The question isn't whether the system resets. The question is, will you be ready when the music stops? The music is about to stop. Are you ready? For more deep dives into the global endgame, subscribe now and share this with one person you don't want to see wiped out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.